Today we're answering the question, where is evolution taking us? Because there is a false dichotomy that exists right now, and that false dichotomy is that we must choose between God and being created and designed and having a purpose to worship God, which isn't much of a purpose anyway, or science, evolution, and randomness. Now, here's the thing. This is a false dichotomy. We don't have to choose between these two options. And this false dichotomy between materialist empirical science and atheism on one hand, and then mainstream religion on the other, this false dichotomy pops up all the time. But we are going to see that we can in fact have an evolution that is inherently imbued with purpose, and we can also have design. We can have design and purpose without an appeal to mainstream religion, without an appeal to a creator God, without an appeal to any kind of mysticism or woo-woo or nonsense like that, and understand it via logic and reason that we are imbued with purpose, and evolution isn't just some sort of random process, but instead is a teleological process with an end goal. So we're going to be taking a look at that today. We're going to see some individuals in the mainstream community that are also actually starting to wake up to that fact, and we're going to answer the important question, where is evolution taking us? Where are we headed? Now keep in mind that I usually drink decaf coffee, but I was out, so I had no choice but to drink caffeinated. So if I'm a little more impassioned today, that's why. But we're talking about the goal of evolution. Where is evolution leading to? And to be able to look at this closer, we are also going to be looking at this article written by Brian Miller. Okay, now Brian Miller is a research coordinator for the Center of Science and Culture. He holds a PhD in physics from Duke University. And the title of this article is The Return of Teleology to Biology. This is very important for what we're talking about with regard to evolution. So we're going to start off by looking at this paragraph that says, biologists have faced a vexing dilemma since the philosophy of scientific materialism came to dominate Western thought. So, biologists are facing a problem since the philosophy that reality is matter and only matter, or the product or that which is produced from matter, exists. So, the materialist philosophy, and scientific materialism is indeed a philosophy, even if it doesn't want to admit it. It is not philosophically literate to understand that it is indeed itself a philosophy. Most people who subscribe to that don't understand that. But we're going to understand here that when you take reality to be material, you have some big problems with regard to biology and evolution. So continuing, life looks designed, but the gatekeepers of most mainstream scientific institutions have forbidden researchers from appealing to teleology as an explanation. So what does teleology mean? Teleology means to strive towards a goal, to strive towards an endpoint. So teleology implies purpose. And so what you have here is that gatekeepers of mainstream scientific institutions are sort of forbidding design and teleology. Now, why is this the case? Because for most scientific materialists, when you say design or teleology, which implies purpose, many of them automatically think that that means you're appealing to some sort of creator God. And of course, this is abhorrent to them. But as we're going to see, we can have purpose, we can have teleology, and we can have design without a creator God and using just logic and reason. That's going to be very important for understanding what evolution is, what we are, and where we're going. So Darwin's theory of evolution appeared to offer an elegant solution to this quandary by positing natural selection as a designer substitute. So Darwin's theory of evolution and natural selection is what they used instead of teleology, instead of striving towards a purpose. Unfortunately, top theorists have publicly acknowledged that this mindless mechanism has no real creative power, but they have offered nothing to plausibly fill the explanatory deficit left in its absence. So essentially what it's saying is that in trying to understand how reality works, they want to jettison teleology, they want to jettison design, they want to jettison purpose. Because in many of their minds, if you accept that, you have to accept the creator God. As I'll show, that's not the case whatsoever. You do not need to accept a creator God. Creator God is logically fallacious and rationally impossible. But they want to eject all that, and what they put in its place was the Darwinian concept of evolution and natural selection. Now, I want to say that in Hyperianism, we absolutely embrace evolution. However, it's teleological evolution, and I'll explain the difference in a moment. But it's important to understand that Darwinian evolution and natural selection is based on randomness and no purpose and no direction. So evolution, in terms of Darwinism and natural selection, is based on random mutation, and then the environment and other factors selecting for random mutations that allow for the survival of that creature. Even though even the will to survive isn't something that's necessarily entailed in that, it's simply that that is the thing that survives, and so that trait gets passed on. But this is a mindless mechanism, this is a purposeless mechanism, and it is a random mechanism. So it accounts for some things, but is extremely poor and impossible to explain some of the evolutionary advantages and developments that we see. And as it said in this article, top theorists have publicly acknowledged that the mindless random mechanism of natural selection and random mutation, that it has no real creative power. And they are constantly trying to purge teleological language from their theories. But let me explain to you a little bit now about teleological evolution and how we can have directed and purposeful evolution without appeal to any sort of creator God. Because this is a false dichotomy, saying that you have to choose between creator God or natural selection. This is not true. So there's a couple different competing theories of evolution. For example, there's Lamarckian evolution and Lamarckian evolution. Here, I'll just read to you the definition. Lamarckism is the notion that an organism can pass on to its offspring physical characteristics that the parent organism acquired through use or disuse during its lifetime. So it's the passing on of its traits, not necessarily simply just due to natural selection, but simply due to use, positive use. Then you have orthogenesis, and orthogenesis is an extremely interesting idea. And orthogenesis, here I'll just read to you a quote again, orthogenesis is also known as orthogenetic evolution, which is progressive evolution. Evolutionary progress or progressionism is the biological hypothesis that organisms have an innate tendency to evolve in a definite direction towards some goal due to some internal mechanism or driving force. Now, this is extremely close to what we're going to explain in our idea of teleological evolution. So orthogenesis says that there is an innate thing that drives organisms to some sort of goal. And this is what powers evolution. And it's important to understand that in Hyperianism, we do share this absolutely. But we have to remember, as I'll show, it's not simply dependent on physical biology, but also on mental coding. And I'll explain what that is. It has to do with mathematical organization and mathematical ontology. And bear with me, because I'll explain all this in a moment. And another idea that I want to sort of put out there, that this is not well known at all, probably because of the person who originated it. But there's this idea of novelty theory that was coined by Terence McKenna. And what Terence McKenna basically said was that at the end of this time, he called it the transcendental object at the end of time. And he looked at the transcendental object at the end of time as being sort of this goal that was pulling everything towards it. And this pull towards the transcendental object at the end of time is what spurs evolution. So we have these different competing ideas of evolution, but none of them really caught on. By far, natural selection and Darwinism is the most popular. So let's talk a little bit about Hyperianism, the concept of teleological evolution, and how that will entail design, purpose, and teleology, but without any need for creator God whatsoever. So here's the idea. In Hyperianism and ontological mathematics, right, which is a mathematical basis of Hyperianism, this is a mathematical reality. But it is not a mathematical reality in terms of the abstract mathematics you're taught in school. For example, it doesn't mean that the notation that you write down is floating around in some sort of transcendent domain. There certainly is a transcendent domain, but what exists there is ontological mathematics, which means real mathematics, which is living mathematics. So in Hyperianism, we know that this is a rational reality, a reality of mind, a reality of mathematics, exemplified by living frequency. So this is a reality of living frequency, which is mind, and all of it obeys the ontological laws of mathematics because it is mathematics, but it's living mathematics. It's mathematics that is alive. It's mathematics based on frequency, modes of frequency, Fourier transforms, things of that nature. And so we are all mathematical beings. We are all mathematical organisms. And the reason why that existence seems like it's designed is because it is designed. But you do not need a creator God for it to be designed. You can have something that is unconsciously designed. So what started the physical realm? The laws of mathematics. The laws of mathematics are necessary and eternal. And in a minute, I'll tell you why they're necessary and eternal. But this is a mathematical reality that follows the laws of mathematics. So you can think of it a bit like an algorithm or a code. So you can imagine, for example, imagine a computer algorithm. A computer algorithm, you could imagine, it could look like designed something. You can see a computer algorithm creating something that shows design. You know, just imagine some sort of computer algorithm out there going through its processes and generating some product, something, and then when we look at that thing, it will look designed because it was designed by the algorithm. Now, is that AI algorithm a conscious creator? No, it's following its internal programming. So, likewise, the reason why everything exhibits design is because it was designed, but it wasn't designed by a conscious creator God in the sky. It was designed by mathematical laws generating mathematical functions. And these mathematical functions, when we interpret them through the senses, are organisms, biological organisms. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, but that might be all well and good, thinking about the computer algorithm. But the computer algorithm had a programmer. Someone had to design the algorithm. So some people might think that's a failing of this idea because, well, if you have an algorithm, don't you need someone to design the algorithm? Well, here's the thing. When it comes to the mathematical laws of reality, no, you don't. Because the base code already exists in the form of the laws of mathematics. And I'm going to tell you why the laws of mathematics exist. But before I do, at base reality, you have the very basic laws of mathematics. And because this is a realm of living mathematics, they don't just sort of sit there and do nothing. They generate frequencies, and these frequencies interact with one another, obeying the laws of Fourier mathematics and wave mathematics. And this is what combines and complexifies to generate more and more complex mathematical programs, like something akin to an algorithm, that will then allow for the generation of more and more complex functions. So in general, what this means is that at the base reality, you have mathematical laws itself, and these mathematical laws generate frequencies, or are themselves frequencies, to put it more aptly, and through their interactions, they generate more and more complex functions. So you can think of it like a computer code that is coding itself. And this is possible because the laws of mathematics are necessary and universal. So you might be thinking, all right, well, who created the laws of mathematics? Who created these frequencies? How did they get there? Well, these mathematical laws exist because this is a rational reality. And existence is entailed in their essence. Now, what this means is that rationally and logically, they must exist. The existence is their essence. It means that they have what's known in philosophy as aseity. And aseity means that the reason for their existence is contained within themselves. They don't depend on anything else for their existence. Now, how is this possible? How can this be?
Okay, I found this on the web for me.
And Siri is, I really need to turn off Siri because Siri just wanted to explain the ontological argument to me, which is really nice, but we're not talking about that right now. I need to turn off Siri, apparently. But where was I going before Siri rudely interrupted me? I was talking about, yes, the necessary existence of these mathematical laws. So these mathematical laws necessarily exist and require no creator God. This is a rational reality. And so how do we understand this? We understand this by realizing that the only thing that can possibly exist is nothingness. And we can rationally understand nothingness through the concept of zero. And then through the concept of zero, we can realize that we can have every single mathematical value possible. To explain all of this in about 2 minutes, like I'm going to do, is impossible. I've put out many videos on this. Look at my playlist, I believe, called The Source Formula for more information. Look up my videos on look up my book on ontological mathematics. Look up books on ontological mathematics by me, by Cody Newman, by Thomas Stark, all great mathematicians. The Hyperion Source also has a great series on this. But anyway, if you have all the mathematical values that are possible, the result is zero, because for every positive value, you also have a negative value. And if for every positive value, you also have a negative value, the total result is zero. So to put things very, very short, there is no creator because nothingness, which is zero, needs no creator because rationally and logically it can exist. So if you are looking for a rational explanation to existence, if that is what you are looking for, then you agree that reason explains existence. Now, we know that reason just doesn't explain existence, that reason is existence. And we want to understand what reason is, not through human invented words, but through mathematics. Because mathematics captures reality objectively. Human invented language does not. We have many different interpretations for different words. We can argue all day long about different definitions. But mathematics is necessary and universal, mathematical truths. So we can understand reality using mathematics, and we can understand rationally that the only thing that can exist is zero, using words that would be nothingness. Because nothingness contains the reason for its existence within itself. Nothingness has aseity. Zero has aseity. Zero is the ground of all existence. Because nothingness requires no creator. The reason for nothingness is existence is contained within itself. What is the reason for nothingness? Nothingness can exist because nothingness requires nothing external to it for its existence. I'm going to say that again because that's very important. Nothingness requires nothing external to it for its existence. It has aseity. It does not depend on anything for its existence other than itself. This is how zero can rationally exist. How does it contain the reason for its existence within itself? By the virtue of it being zero and nothingness, it doesn't need anything external to exist. Now, if we look at it internally, as it is in itself, we know that zero can contain all of mathematics, because all of mathematics balances to zero, because for every positive value, we'll also get a negative value. So zero is not empty, but is a container for living mathematics. It has aseity, and it has the reason for its existence within itself because it requires nothing external. It only requires itself. That is what is internal to itself. That is the ground of existence. Zero, mathematical law. And I won't get all of it into it now, but we can see how this mathematical law, ontologically speaking, is actually frequencies. Again, I have many videos on this. I won't get into it now, but we can see that this is the case, that this ends up representing itself via frequency patterns. So you basically have this mathematical coding that is alive. It's living mathematical coding. And it is able to, through its own inner interactions, start complexifying itself. Now, this is an unconscious process, sort of like an algorithm. Now, it's not the same as an algorithm because an algorithm has no internal subjective aspect. The living mathematics and the frequencies of reality does. But you see, now you have something that seems like it is designed. But it is not designed by an external creator God. It exhibits order and pattern because it is the exemplar of order and pattern itself. Mathematics. What more? You cannot get anything more ordered and patterned than mathematics. Mathematics literally is order and pattern. That's why things exhibit order and pattern. Not because a God created them, because reality literally is order and pattern. So what is evolution? Evolution is this order and pattern trying to organize itself to be more ordered and more patterned. That is increasing its symmetry. And so when we look around at evolution and what's happening, it is not a random process. It is not a mindless process. It is rather a process of living mathematics, which is living mind, which is living pattern, organizing itself and increasing its organization and pattern. Now, where is evolution taking us? Because now teleology is imbued in this. What is the teleological goal of evolution? The most optimal state possible. In Hyperianism, we know this as the omega point or the final cause. This is the most ordered and symmetrical point possible. Now remember, I'm talking in terms of mathematical, so it can seem maybe kind of dry or emotionless or feelingless. But we're talking in terms of the formal aspect. All of the formal aspects that we talk about have an internal aspect to them. So reaching the most ordered state might seem kind of, oh, that's very bland, but that means a point of perfect unity, a point of like perfect bliss, love, and harmony. So everything has a flip side to it. Everything has the formal rational aspect, and then the experience, the inner experience of that formal rational aspect. That's why it's really important to understand both perspectives, but always remember that reason comes first, because reason is what allows that experience to be possible. So if we look around at reality, we can even see that reality is exhibiting progression. Now, unlike some interpretations of orthogenesis, which says the progression of reality is linear, not all interpretations say that, but some do. Remember, in teleological evolution, it's not always linear. There will always be progress, but it's not always going to be steady process. You're going to have, as Nietzsche talked about this when he talked about the path from going from human to beyond human. He said, crossing that path, there's going to be a lot of stuttering, a lot of shaking on that. He described it like a tightrope, a shaking, a stopping, a looking back. And basically what that means is that there's a lot of, it's not a linear progress. Sometimes we'll have setbacks. Sometimes we have things that might set us back. Sometimes we might go backwards. Like if a mainstream religion starts taking over, sometimes that smashes all progress to pieces. Like in ancient times when mainstream Christianity destroyed, so much pagan knowledge of philosophy and mathematics. That was when we were set back because of something like mainstream religion. So we can have halting, we can have backwards anti-progression. But ultimately, net, overall, we will be heading towards a teleological endpoint, towards a progression. And we can see this all around us. And this is one of the failures that mainstream science fails to take into account, is that they think that there's no teleology to reality, but humans exhibit a certain teleology based on Nietzschean will to power. So what I mean by that is, for example, if you look around at humanity, is humanity simply trying to survive? I mean, I know a lot of us are, because this world is in a shitty state. But as a rule, is every single human being on Earth just trying to survive? No, they're not. Look at, some of the rich billionaire elite. Are they simply focused on survival? No, they're focused on increasing their power. And it's a very sick way of doing this. It's a disgusting, selfish way of doing it, because it reduces the evolution of everyone else around them, because they're sucking all the resources for themselves and they don't give a fuck about the collective. But nonetheless, it's just an example where you can see it is obvious and apparent that there is not just simply a impetus towards survival, but towards power acquisition. And ultimately, in terms of Hyperianism and ontological mathematics, we can know this as a sort of a will to actualization. So you have all these beings that are, even if they don't know it, they are ultimately mathematical beings that are trying to increase their own mathematical pattern, mathematical order. And that reflects itself through the actions taken in the real world. For those who are just trying to survive, well, to be able to increase your mathematical order, you have to be able to have a healthy vehicle, your body. You have to be able to survive, so you're going to look for resources. You're going to try and survive, so you have the opportunity to evolve. Someone like the billionaire rich elite, they're going to try and increase their actualization by accumulating all the resources for themselves and simply increase themselves that way. And if they have a skewed reality tunnel, they might not even know what true actualization is. They might just be looking for empty pleasure or adoration by the masses or whatever have you. But in any case, they're trying to amplify whatever they have subjectively defined as the best action for themselves. But in Hyperianism and ontological mathematics, we know that ultimately we are all in this together. At the root, at the source, literally, we're all mathematical entities, and we exist in an enormous feedback loop, in a monadic neural network, in an idealist neural network. And so we know that all of our internal optimization is also bound up with the optimization of all reality. So, for example, if you yourself are optimizing, your optimization is going to affect the pattern of the universe as a whole. And you can kind of understand that through the idea of a Rubik's Cube. Is you can think of like, if you just try and solve one side of the Rubik's Cube, well, that side might get solved, but you might mess up all the other sides in the process. So in an analogy, we can kind of think of that as a single mind being very selfish and only caring about themselves. They'll try and optimize their pattern, but they'll say, who gives a fuck about the collective, and mess up the pattern of the collective. We in Hyperianism are like those that want to optimize ourselves and the collective at the same time, because we realize that ultimately, from the absolute perspective, when we obtain absolute consciousness, that we are all in this together, and my optimization affects your optimization. So from the monadic perspective, we understand we're all individual monadic minds that need to optimize individually. And then from the absolute perspective, we understand that we all are part of the absolute neural network, the monadic neural network. And so our evolution is bound up with each other, because in that sense, from that perspective, I am me or I am you and you are me. So there are many different understandings that one has to come to. And so ultimately what this means is that all of reality is on this evolutionary trajectory towards the omega point, which is the final cause, which is the ultimate point of teleology, which is perfect order, perfect harmony, and perfect bliss, both as individuals and as a collective. And this entails evolving our consciousness. This is why in Hyperianism we emphasize attaining the next level of consciousness, because when we start to rationally and intuitively gain these higher modes of consciousness, we understand what reality is. First, through monadic consciousness, we understand that we are all individual minds and are eternal and are on a quest for evolution. And then through the attainment of absolute consciousness, we understand that we are all reality and all minds together as one, both the source and the holos, and all things, and we must optimize as a collective. So evolving through consciousness is important, and ultimately much more important than any sort of biological evolution. So that's another thing to understand, is that mental evolution powers biological evolution. Biological evolution is really just a reflection or a representation of mental evolution. Mental evolution powers everything. And so we are evolving first in these physical forms, but eventually, as we increase and optimize in our evolution, we will no longer necessarily need physical forms, at least as we understand them as space-time representations in the holos. We'll be able to evolve past this. We'll even be able to evolve to the point where we are creating our own worlds together, quote unquote worlds, but these are creating new frequency spaces. You can think of them as sort of like shared dream worlds that we'll be able to organize and create together. This is going well past humanity. And if these ideas seem kind of crazy to you, they're really not. When you start to raise your consciousness, you see these ideas are just obvious. I mean, the way that humans understand reality now is extremely and ridiculously primitive. It's laughable. And yeah, it's really hard for humanity to understand the ideas that we talk about. Just like it would be very, very hard for, let's say, just like it's impossible for animals to understand the idea of society, culture, and complex conceptual language. They just can't. Humanity, without having rationally, raised their consciousness level to monadic consciousness and absolute consciousness, really has a hard time grasping these ideas. But it becomes obvious. Obviously, humanity is not the end point of evolution. We are on a teleological trajectory powered by the rational laws, deductive laws of mathematics. And this entails evolving mentally. And technology will be extremely helpful with this as well, don't get me wrong. But it's a means to an end, ultimately. And we will be able to create these shared dream spaces together where we will be able to work on even furthermore, optimizing our own mathematical symmetry, both as individuals and a collective. And ultimately, what this means in reaching the omega point is we evolve into God. That is what we are. Ourselves, both individually and collectively, fully actualized, all powerful, in perfect harmony and in perfect union and in perfect symmetry. So we are on a path of apotheosis and evolution to divinity. And that's why it's important to understand what reality is, and why when we create a new world and create new terra, we do so with the understanding of what reality is. Because how can you order a society that has a goal if you don't know what reality is? And that's the thing. When we create new terra, it's teleological. It's goal-oriented. Because you want to create a society that reflects the understanding of what reality is. Right now, we have a mindless, capitalistic, machine-like world because it's run by people that have no understanding of what reality is, and they themselves are motivated by nothing but greed, selfishness, and money. So it produces a world that where all you get is greed and selfishness and simply the desire for money. We want to construct a new world that is based on the rational understanding that this is a teleological and purposeful universe where we are here to learn and grow together and actualize, so that we can create the best of all possible worlds for ourselves and for others, in which we all have the opportunity to grow and learn together in our journey of apotheosis. And that's what reality should be. It shouldn't be this dog-eat-dog world that's just hellish to live in, but rather a fun and beautiful and exciting journey. We are here together experiencing ourselves in this world of multiplicity and are on our journey to the absolute and godhood. And we should be really excited about this and having fun together and thinking of it almost like a video game that we're playing together, and we should be helping each other, and it should be fun and exciting and interesting, not like this hellish landscape we have now. And that's the thing. I get so many people that say, oh, they want to escape, and then you get these ideas like nirvana and heaven, which is all about escapism. No, the only reason why you feel that way is because this world is hellish. We can transform this world into something beautiful. We can build the kingdom of God on earth, which is our kingdom. We can build our kingdom here and now on earth, and it can be something beautiful where we look at life in an exciting way. Wouldn't that be nice? Think about that. Think about, I'm sure you get up in the morning. I mean, not all of you, but I'm sure a lot of you get up in the morning and you just dread it. You have to go to jobs that you hate. You have to talk to people you don't like. You have to, make money for overpriced goods and materials that you can barely afford, and you have barely any time for yourself. And this world is hellish. And that's even good conditions, relatively speaking, for this world. There's a lot of people that are starving and are just fighting to survive, in a more, because of violence and war. And, just look at what's happening in the world right now, without me mentioning certain things, because I can't, because of social media censorship. You know what I mean. There are people that are just, even human rights, like what's going on in Texas. Human rights are being stripped away. Anyway, this is a hellish world. Imagine a world where you actually want to get up in the morning and it's exciting. And you're just like, oh, wow, I can't wait to, experience this thing today. I can't wait to learn this new thing. I can't wait to, create this with my friends, with my collective that I vibe with and I have chosen for myself and that I get along with. And let's create brilliant new projects. Let's help the world evolve. Let's like something exciting. And I know that seems like to many people a crazy idea, but if you think that's a crazy idea, realize that's just a product of brainwashing. It's not a crazy idea. It's something that should be obvious and common sense. It should be common sense to have a positive experience. It's not something that's crazy. It's kind of the bare minimum. But we don't want to create the bare minimum. We want to create the maximum. And that's what we'll do. But right now, this world isn't even at the bare minimum. It's fight to survive, which is ridiculous. We don't want to give you in a new world what you need to survive. We don't want to give you what you need to survive. We want to give you what you need to thrive. Wouldn't that be nice? It's not a dream. Let's make it happen. It can become an actuality. That's it. It can. As soon as you decide it. As soon as we come together and make it happen. Because evolution isn't something that's done to us. It is what we are. Remember where I talked about, sort of unconscious evolution, where it's kind of like an algorithm that just happens, but it's unconscious? Yeah, but guess what? We have become conscious now, which means we can control evolution because we are evolution, but we are evolution that has become conscious of itself. So we can transform this world as soon as enough people realize this and just go, hey, you know what? Life doesn't need to be hell. We don't have to have billionaires in charge. We can change everything right now. We can do that. And this is history in the making. And through Hyperionism, we are coming together to make that happen. But make sure that you are actually doing the work to make that happen by spreading this information, planting those seeds of knowledge, helping raise consciousness, so that ultimately, together, we have enough will to power to actualize it. So, remember, evolution isn't this dead, mindless, random mechanism. It is what we are. We are the force of evolution. We are the force of change, and we are here to change the world. I want to give a shout out to all our top supporters on Patreon, especially Timothy, Renaissance, Jordy, and Liam. You guys are awesome. And all our top supporters. Thank you for everyone who supports on Patreon. Support on Patreon, you'll get access to our weekly secret live streams. You'll get access to my lecture notes, one for today's topic as well. It's the best way to support my work with all the censorship that goes on social media. It means a lot. So the link will pop up right around here somewhere. Thank you so much.